Hello, Brad here, just to say we're super proud that the Friday 5pm podcast is sponsored by the Malt Miller, the UK's best home brew store.
We use the Malt Miller for all of our homebrew experiments, as well as tapping them up for advice and binging on their awesome YouTube channel all the time.
That's why whenever we release a homebrew video, we put a recipe kit live on the Malt Miller, so you can brew with the exact same amazing ingredients that we did. The same ingredients used by pro brewers.
So alongside the Malt Miller's nitro-flushed hops, cold-stored yeast and milled-to-order malts, you can pick up recipe kits for our 5 Points Best Bitter, Russian River West Coast IPA, and now the fastest beer in the world, a hazy session IPA that goes from grain to glass in less than 48 hours.
Sign up to their newsletter at tinyurl.com/Malt Miller to get 5% off your first order. With the Malt Miller's amazing customer service and Johnny's 48-hour recipe, you could order the ingredients on a Monday and be drinking the beer by the weekend.
Speaking of which, it's Friday.
It's 5pm.
So enjoy this week's Friday 5pm podcast. It's Friday, it's 5pm, and I hope you all feel better than we do, because I think I'm still a bit hungover from the Czech Republic. What about you?
I don't know what I had while I was out there, but it absolutely knocked me for six. I was super drugged up.
7.5% lager in a cellar, probably.
Yeah. Well, no, it's pre going out there, but like when you've got such an amazing trip lined up, you're not going to cancel it, are you? So
You're not.
You have to just power through your man flu or whatever it is you got going on. But yeah, I've just been pretty much unconscious today, just in hibernation mode where I'm just physically exhausted. But mate, what a trip. But before we get on to that, Johnny, we need to talk about something we got coming up very soon in the near future, which everyone should get involved in.
We do, yeah. So we've still got our Colonel live show on the 27th of April. There is still time to grab yourself a box. All you've got to do is sign up to Bruiser. If you use the code CBC8, you will get £8 off your first box with Bruiser, which will include lots of delicious beers from the Colonel that we'll be tasting through with the brewers on the 27th of April on the YouTube channel. If you just want to have that one box, it's really easy to cancel. If you want to keep going, there are lots of amazing breweries on the Bruiser website, and each month you can select your brewery and you'll get a fresh curated box from that brewery that month, and you can just keep choosing the amazing breweries. There's, I think, about 100 breweries on there you can choose from each month. And some of our favourite breweries, there's Siren, there's Verdant, there's, of course, Colonel, there's Crossover, who was our video last week. Lots of amazing people. And it's a very exciting show, It's going to be probably the most varied box in terms of style. And obviously, there's going to be lots of chat about the early days of craft, back when it was less complicated than it is today, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. As we say, one of our all-time favourite breweries. Your man's a legend. I think I called him the daddy last week, which you said was sexual sounding. Was not my intention. I was just talking the old school daddy before it got kind of taken over by people calling people daddy and all this sort of stuff.
What's old school daddy?
Just the daddy, like daddy's tomato sauce or whatever, like not tomato sauce, brown sauce, like the
brown
daddy.
Sauce.
It's like it feels like an old sort of 1980s, 1990s sort of term of affection for something that's just great. Not something you want to necessarily sleep with, Johnny.
Right.
Something
okay.
that's just
Good
top of the top. Like daddy's brown sauce, which is definitely not as good as HP sauce, but.
Not the daddy of sauces.
No, by no means. Do you know what? I don't think I've had daddy's brown sauce.
You must have had daddy's.
Wrong.
If you've been
in years and years.
Oh, okay.
That was where I was going with it.
Have you not been to a mid-chain place and had a breakfast? Because it's always daddy's.
I just don't like saying that phrase now. I've just said it a million times, but I do remember that had a cool. When I was a kid, I enjoyed it because it had a face on the side, which you turned it one way and it was a face, and then you turned it up the other way and it was still a face. It was like one of those sort of mystical puzzles where the eyebrows made the lips or something mental. It was good. I remember it back in the day being fun. So, it was fun. It just was just an inferior
sauce.
Inferior sauce, yeah. Not like the Colonel, which is not an inferior sauce. Every
is it inferior? Is that the opposite of inferior?
It's inferior.
Superior, mate. I guess is probably
ethereal.
Probably right.
Ethereal.
Oh, blimey!
That's not the opposite, but it sounds kind of similar. So yeah,
Lots of words we're not sure about the meaning of being thrown out in this early podcast. Possibly the tiredness and all the lager. So yeah, sign up to Bruiser. Join us for what's going to be an amazing event with the wonderful Colonel Brewery. The link and of course the code is down below. Now, should we talk about this week's video? The video that came out late and nearly didn't happen at all for lots of reasons, mostly lager related. It was in the final throes of being ready for the last 3 days, and I kept trying to find 10, 15 minutes just to finish it off while we were on the trip, and there were no 10 or 15 minutes, really.
Impossible. It's such an action-packed mini adventure out in Czech that there was just hardly any downtime, let's be honest.
I actually, when we got back from the very late night, because I'd settled for a beer rather than the 2 cocktails that you went for, I did get into bed, get out the laptop, and be like, I'm just going to finish it. And this was at 1:30 in the morning. Yeah. And unsurprisingly, I fell asleep with the laptop on me.
Oh, look at that. Beautiful dedication.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, not really, because I fell asleep midway through doing my work.
Oh, yeah, good intentions, though.
I did. Somebody on Twitter called us slackers.
What?
I was like, we were working very hard in the Czech Republic. Just because you got a beer in your hand doesn't mean you're not working, which I find myself having to tell a lot of people due to our chosen career.
This kind of, I'm not going to say it infuriates me, Johnny, but it kind of bugs me a little bit when people say, have fun on holiday. I'm like, I'm not going on holiday. I'm going on a work trip.
My wife did it today. She corrected herself.
Yeah.
But it's still smarted a little bit.
Yeah. Don't get us wrong. This is great. We've made a good career choice in this, what we do with Craft Beer Channel. But these are work.
Yeah.
This still
holidays imply relaxing.
Yeah, it ain't relaxing.
None of that really happened.
It ain't relaxing. And it wasn't relaxing for our hosts either, I don't think, because it was action-packed. We'll get into that.
Well, and they then had to keep going when the American journalists turned up. So,
oh mate,
they've got stamina. Yes. Anyway, we keep trying to not talk about it and keep talking about it. So let's go to this week's video, which was me alone in a shed drinking 20 best bitters that I bought from a supermarket early in the morning.
And also, it kind of looks like you pixelated your knob at the start of the video.
That was very much what I was going for.
Which just looked wrong.
I should be very concerned because it was sort of red and purple, the pixelations.
I know. I thought they were disturbing pixel colours for a sort of mid-drift censorship. Yeah, I was not happy with it. I even text you about it. But it's funny. It's funny, Johnny. I just wasn't sure if it was intentional. But
you just wanted me to know that you were uncomfortable with it. Yeah. Yeah.
Uncomfortable was wrong. But it was pretty suggestive. It was going in hot, straight off the.
People who haven't seen this video are going to be baffled as to what's going on here, and I'm not going to clarify it. So so I went shopping. I think we talked about it in last week's podcast or the week before. Got slightly guilted by the lady at Aldi. But thoroughly enjoyed my time drinking 20 bottle bitters. It's not my favourite thing to drink. I've never really fallen in love with a bottled best bitter or a canned best bitter. You just always, they're like the ghost of the cask ale they should be. You know, every time I drink it, I'm just reminded of how much better it could be. But actually, the scores on average were pretty high. It's one of those categories that when you're beer judging, I think people often try to avoid because sadly within the UK there's a lot of bad bitter put in bottle. But actually a lot of them were very good indeed. And some of them, as you might be able to tell from the end of the video, I felt like I've been a bit harsh on some of them as well. Which is, you know, without context, you do end up being a bit harsher, I think. You know, you don't forgive the flaws if you're not feeling any direct connection to the beer. You're like, well, that's rubbish. Yeah. So I was a bit rude about some beers I would enjoy and, you know, seek out. But that's the joy of these tests. It takes away the context.
Well, I don't know how you keep any sort of what do you call it? Any kind of not frame reference over the course of trying 20 beers. My palate is. Somebody asked, could I be in a video? My palate is not refined enough to be picking 20 different beers apart. and comparing them. I don't think. I mean, I have done it. Look, I have done it, but I just don't think I could get through 20 best bottles of best bitter necessarily. Not feeling incredibly paranoid about. Did I make the right choice? Why does this one taste like meat? Like what's going on with this guy? This guy's like whatever, like totally insane flavors which I wouldn't be expecting in there. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to see someone who's got such a refined palate describe flavors which you just shouldn't think would necessarily be in a bottle of beer. So it's kind of, I think, shocking, interesting, maybe a bit revelatory. So it's good. Oof. It's good. And even with, a category which a lot of people be like, best bitter in a bottle, no thanks. There's some absolute stunners in there, which, on cask are obviously all-time classics. So it's great to see some of these things have translated really, really well.
And that's the word for it, because it's very, very hard to reproduce. These beers were born on cask, and they're born to be served with low carbonation at warmer temperatures, and with that incredible, brewery fresh kind of cask feel that makes it such a wonderful format. You can't get that in bottles, certainly not in supermarket bought bottles, because they're just not going to be bang fresh. And so I was amazed that, I've drunk quite a lot of Tribute in bottle, to be fair, but I was amazed that the Harveys and the Timmies and London Pride were really good, because they're not really brands I'd ever touch unless I even knew that the cask was really fresh, to be honest. So it was kind of revelatory. But the biggest revelation was, of course, that Thirsty Ferret, a beer that appears in all these terrible Christmas variety packs that poor beer geeks get bought by relatives that don't know any better. I'd always dismissed it as just one of those. It was a good beer, and I've never loved other Badger Ales, but it was very good. I'd seek that out on cast to see what it's like now. That was the biggest surprise and takeaway for me.
I quite like the sound of the knockoff Audi one that beat out, was it the Bombardier with Doombar? I can't remember now.
It's Hobgoblin.
Sorry, Hobgoblin.
The Harpers, so the Audi knockoff of Hobgoblin was better, but the Doombar knockoff was worse than Doombar. And so that is a phrase I never thought I'd say.
Worse than Doombar knockoff is worse than Doombar. What are you accounting the Hobgoblin factor?
Well,
for? Do you think you got a bad one there, or like an old one?
No. It tasted exactly like I remember Hobgoblin tasting. The yeast that's used, interestingly, it was a yeast that was used quite a lot at the start of the American craft beer revolution. It has a pretty terrible reputation over there because it's not a great yeast. It kicks out a lot of off flavors unless you're extraordinarily careful, and it is part of the profile of Hobgoblin. This slight green apple acetaldehyde, slightly Belgian-y, gnarly kind of character to it. The problem is, that really works when it's a really mellow amount of it, like it really works in Broadside. It doesn't dominate the beer. The problem I have with Hobgoblin is it reeks of acetaldehyde for me. Maybe I'm a little bit sensitive to that flavour, but it just overpowers everything else about that beer. And the reason that the knockoff was better is because it was slightly more muted. And they'll have used the exact same yeast, and they'd have probably got the recipe from some dark corner of the internet, and they did a pretty good job. Whereas with the Doombar one, something really funky happened with that fermentation, because that was basically a Dunkelweiss kind of aroma, and then just no body, no sweetness, no nothing. It was terrible. So a Hobgoblin tasted exactly as I remember, and it's not for me, but it is one of those beers that is much loved by lots of people. If you're slightly numb to acetaldehyde, which lots of people probably are, you could really enjoy that beer, I think. But in terms of brewing in terms of technical brewing, it's a flaw, and in terms of flavor, for me, it's a flaw. But as with all of these things, I never want to judge people for what they drink. If you enjoy Hobgoblin, if you enjoy Doombar, all power to you. But in terms of an example of a British bitter, which arguably Hobgoblin isn't. I don't think Ruby Ale is really a style. It probably is a bitter, but all power to you if you enjoy that. But it's not for me, and it's not technically correct.
I think we can leave it at that. I think that's fair enough assessment of that. I think that's the thing, right? Taste is so subjective, and like people are into all kinds of different funky things, which is totally fair enough. I think you can begin to sort of crave a flavour which to someone who's never had it before is gross, but it can be an acquired thing over time. So I can imagine if you've been drinking something your whole life, you wouldn't. Yeah,
that's your reference point.
That's your reference point. Yeah. So you're not going to pick these things up.
Lots of people say that Pilsner Urquell is disgusting, and maybe they're sensitive to diacetyl because there is some diacetyl in there. But you and me love it. But a lot of beer geeks and a lot of just normal drinkers, a lot of Czech people don't particularly enjoy Pilsner Urquell. It is subjective and borderline a flaw. It's not a very good representation of Czech Pilsner because there shouldn't really be any diacetyl in there, but it's its own glorious little thing. Talking of glorious little things, what tasty comments did you pick up?
Okay, so I've got a few for you, Johnny. First one is from Rick Rogers, who I think we've had on the podcast before. Rick Rogers has come out of a sort of Tenacious D type.
I know where this one's going. Yeah,
which is that the best beer in the world? Nah, just a tribute. So I've murdered the way I've sort of not sung that or whatever, but yeah, this is just a tribute. Carl Gass and whatever he's called, Jack Black. There you go. So I enjoyed that one. So the Potato Boy has.
I'm intrigued by what he has to say.
He's referenced the podcast suggestion of mine from last week. Is that I'd be very upset if you didn't call this best of the bests.
Yeah.
And he said best of the best in the first 10 seconds. Get in there, brothers.
Straight up.
So yeah, and I think you said we're going to kill some kings as well, which I thought was quite good. I like that.
We didn't in the end. I was mildly rude about Adnams, which I feel really bad about. But otherwise most kings remained on their thrones,
unscathed.
No one beheaded.
Wasn't the Battle of the Seven Kings, whatever it is, in Game of Thrones?
No.
Is that Game of Thrones? I'm delirious on flu medication.
God, I don't know. We know that cultural reference are not our strong point.
Yeah.
We'll leave it to Rick Rogers.
Rick Rogers, indeed. What have you got for me, Johnny? What comments have you tickled you?
I was intrigued by Rob Collingridge's comment, who said, "You say it's a style that's been left behind. I'm curious whether that's because a lot of these more trad beers are uninspiring, or they became uninspiring because modern brewers left them behind." Because the answer is it's both, really. So cask ale, really struggled during the 70s and 80s as pale lager finally came to the UK. It was behind all of Europe. Everybody got excited by pale lager and also got excited by kegged bitters, which sort of took over that role of I don't want to drink this lager. So it fell out of favour. It had a little renaissance, actually, I think, in the early 2000s, but never really got back to where it was, and it already had the male, pale and stale image that it really struggles to shake even today. So, the sort of the camera types of the 70s who were the left-wing revolutionaries had all, grown up, not got rid of their sandals, but added socks. This is the sort of the cliche, and it's really struggled to kind of shake it. And that's why craft beer in the UK, I think, kind of left it behind. It wasn't just a reaction to pale lager, it was a reaction to cask ale. It was like, cask ale isn't very hoppy. It's all English hops. We want to do something new and exciting. And I think in every nation that had a beer culture before craft came along, it's a real shame that they didn't embrace that earlier. And it's great to see breweries starting to now, as we learned on the Verdant Live show, they're now making cask ale a real part of their, at least local kind of identity. And we've seen lots and lots of great breweries, Attic, Brew by Numbers, Northern Monk have sort of always just about held on to their cask range, or at least Eternal in cask, and we're starting to see a little nod towards our British roots, but it's still not enough for me. I think every brewery should still have some kind of cask range. If they have a tap room, I think, if you can put cask fresh stuff on in your tap room, you really should, because it's part of our culture, and it's something that somebody not from the UK is always going to look for when they go to a craft brewery.
So on that note, Johnny, you flashed a photo of me yesterday of something that you were a bit unsure of, which was Tiny Rebel have released a load of beers that are kind of trad styles. And what do you think about that? Because you just said you think every brewery should maybe do that, but those guys are almost sort of fetishizing it. Like they don't really they don't have a love for that kind of thing. They're just sort of a brewery that sort of do sensationalist sort of stuff to get kind of attention, aren't they? Really, lots of hype.
It's a really interesting one, because Tiny Rebel for a long time were very serious about cask. The beer that made them, the beer that put them on the map was Kutch, their basically American hopped red ale, which won Champion Beer of Britain in 2014 or 15. And obviously that was a cask beer, and that was huge for them. And I was working for one of their distributors at the time, and it absolutely exploded. And they have kept the love for cask ale kind of going, but then they had this other side to their personality, which was all pastry, all cartoon. I mean, all of their branding has been cartoony, but really, really went down that road of adjunct heavy sours and porters and even pale ales with cartoon branding, getting in trouble with the Portman Group, who sort of, to some extent, police regulate alcohol advertising in the UK, and really went down that route of pushing nostalgia buttons, producing stuff that's about as untraditional as you get, and then they come back around and put it in can with that treatment, that cartoony kind of treatment. It made me feel a bit uncomfortable, because it felt like fetishizing isn't the wrong word. It's infantilizing, this glorious history that we have, and a history that they used to be great representatives of. So I think that's why it made me feel a bit uncomfortable, because they were once champions of modern cask ale, and they've come back to it almost like undermining it. If another brewery had come out that didn't have any cask heritage with those beers, the way that they're designed and the way that they look, I'd have been like, oh, okay, fine. But the fact that it's a brewery that I know didn't need to do that and owes a lot to the cask ale format and to cask ale drinkers, it just felt a bit wrong. I didn't like seeing it dressed up in the same way as their big adjunct sours.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't feel that authentic or whatever. I guess my point yesterday was like, if some of the people that are drinking those big adjunct beers they're making, who've potentially never tried any sort of more traditional styles, if Tiny Rebel opened that world to them, that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's okay.
Yeah, and, I mean, at that point, I'm just getting increasingly irrelevant and curmudgeonly, and we should be finding any way to welcome new people into those spaces of exciting traditional beer.
It was weird, because obviously they're like, all of their kind of like label artwork is kind of super stylized and cartoony and all the rest of it. These had a similar feeling. They were kind of like cartoony versions of classic sort of cask label marks and stuff. Which I as a designer, I'm like, it kind of looks kind of cool. I get the design language straight away, but maybe it is a bit disrespectful. I don't know, but like you say, that history of Kutch.
It's not the respect that, like, I love it when breweries sort of tear out the rule books and play around with history. I don't know. It's very hard to describe what made me uncomfortable. It was a lot of things.
Respect's probably the wrong word. It's not even about respect. It's their language of design, isn't it? So it's weird seeing it applied to something like that, because it's so unexpected and it feels a bit discombobulating. I think. Yeah. You're just like, what? It's weird.
I mean, the more I think about it, the more I think I'm also dead wrong about it, because their designs have always been like that, like Fubar and Kutch and all these beers that were great on cask were, had the teddy bear on think the teddy bear had a gun on or a grenade on Fubar, and Kutch it sort of hippie. Right. Yeah, so I don't know. It just I think I've become more protected of British Cask with all the content we've done, and I didn't quite like seeing it sent up. So it's probably just me that has the issue, not Tiny Rebel.
Yeah. We had some comments from around the world already, which I think is quite interesting. A lot of people watching this from all over the place. Thomas Backer said, Hobgoblin is the bitter on tap at my local here in Turku, Finland. That's quite amazing that you can get it in Finland. I actually prefer it to Bombardier, which was the tap before, and even to Fuller's ESB.
But not Bombardier, Bombardier.
Oh, sorry, I'm dyslexic. I don't know why I keep saying
Well, I think the only reason I raised that is isn't Bombardier like a spirit of some description?
I don't know. I'm high on life. I'm high on
life and Lemsip.
Flu medication, and I'm high on reading Thomas's comment. But yeah, so he prefers that over Bombardier and also Fuller's ESB, which have all been on tap.
Oh no! I'll Bombardier, sure. Fuller's ESB is a world-class beer. That hurts.
We've got another comment from Antima, who's obviously out in America. He said, "I've seen more London Pride in the US, but always assumed it was another basic import. But he's going to give it a bit more of a try now. So that is the thing.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah,
you do see London Pride kind of get out to places like America." And I guess maybe that, like, if you're an American, you might see something that looks so British that you think that's going to be rubbish, because it looks like almost like overly, like it's too British somehow, maybe. But there you go.
Yeah, and I think it's just America gets a lot of slightly tired British ale in bottle. But London Pride on its day is definitely one of the best of them, as the blind taste test showed.
It's amazing. Simon Borton says, this is quite a strange comment. I live in Estonia and homebrew. I miss the cask ales, but obviously it doesn't make sense to do cask for one person. So I've been working on cask in a bottle. And they'd like to send you some, Johnny. By
cask in a bottle, does he just mean bottle conditioned?
I don't know.
I can only assume.
Yeah, I guess bottle condition. Yeah, that makes sense. I read it and I was like, I'm not quite sure what Simon means, but I guess bottle condition.
It must be just bottle condition. There's plenty of that in the UK, so I appreciate the offer, but that is how most homebrewers in the UK have to operate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what do you think? Should we talk a little bit about Budvar, or should we save? Should we save that? Yeah,
we'll have to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a little bit about it. Yeah,
it's been a revelatory trip. I feel like we say this after most trips, but that's because drinking beer in the right place is the best way to enjoy any beer. You know, go to the place of origin and it will taste better, whether it's a technical reason, like there is, drinking in the cellar, it was going to taste amazing, or whether it's just, having the right context. And we had so much context, so much. We learned a lot about Czech culture and Czech beer culture as much as we did about Budvar, the brewery, and the beer.
Oh, when we were down for breakfast on the last day, I've observed a cultural quirk of the Czech people.
Oh, go on.
Which I thought it was just Radim, but then Veronica confirmed that this is a thing they do, right? So maybe quite a few listeners would know Radim. He's global ambassador now for Budvar. He's what would you describe him as? He's like a raconteur of the tap. He's like a sort of guns. He's like a mountain of a man, like a bit of a sort of gunslinger. I could see him in Game of Thrones, actually.
Gunslinger.
He's got a kind of like swag. He's got a swagger. He's got a leather apron on. Maybe not a gunslinger, but he's got some swagger about him. A medieval sort of gunslinger type dude. And we were eating breakfast. I was trying to force down some porridge because I wasn't feeling great, but I needed to have some medication. And I noticed Radim sort of had some bread rolls. Fair enough. Then he got some butter. Also fair enough, Johnny. But he didn't cut the roll in half. He took the roll, he buttered the bottom of the roll, and then he stuck a slab of cheese on the bottom of the roll, and then he just started eating it. On the base of a roll, uncut.
But the base upwards.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, Radim, mate, what are you doing there? I was like, is that you? Is that a Radim thing?
He's a busy man. He hasn't got time to slice his rolls. Clearly.
Yeah. I think he had like 3 boiled eggs, and then he went in on the roll. And when I say boiled eggs, he left the yolk. He just had the whites. I think he's in a bit of sort of training mode at the moment. But he said, no, this is a Czech thing. He's like, we do this. He's like, we butter the bottom, and then we just sort of like squeeze something on the top of it and eat it.
Wow.
So it's like an anti-sandwich. It's very odd. From being from a nation where we literally invented sliced bread, mate. And like the idea of making stuff in between bread, I was quite disturbed to watch someone eat a bread roll like that. But
sometimes we see such remarkable things on our trips that I think they're just setting us up. They're like, we're going to make him go home and tell this story about the time that Radim put cheese on the bottom of his roll.
Yeah, buttered the bottom of a roll. Like, wild. That's hard. That's a hard surface to butter. You want to butter in the middle where it's soft and giving.
You want a surface that's going to get as much butter on there and potentially melt a little bit. You don't put it on the crust.
No. Crazy. It's absolutely crazy, Johnny.
Yeah. I'm glad your main takeaway from Czech Republic was how they eat their rolls.
No, I just like, I like to spot little weird, is that a picadillo? No, like a sort of cultural quirks as you sort of travel around. You notice things are slightly different in different places, and it makes sense to wherever you are. But
this reminded me of the other cultural quirk where we were in a restaurant on the last night.
Yeah.
And suddenly the staff started bringing around shots of rum for everybody.
Oh God. Yeah.
And it was because a man had a daughter born, and they were celebrating that, but his partner and the daughter were not there celebrating. I guess they were in the hospital. He was buying everyone shots at the bar. Yeah. Which again, I think Veronica confirmed is a thing that happens. Like the man takes the family out while the mother, cares for the brand new life. It felt lovely, but when you think about it, you're like, shouldn't you be in the hospital?
The way that they both kind of justified it to us was like, it's a good luck thing. It's cultural. It's a good luck thing. It's tradition. So, I mean, it does feel a bit like, mate, you should probably be with your wife, gently caressing her forehead or something and telling her, you love her, not getting on the lash with some
getting
lads.
On the goulash.
Getting on the goulash with some boys from London that you don't even know, that you just, like, we went over to his table and like cheersed him and stuff. It was cool, wasn't it? It was cool.
It was a nice moment.
Yeah, it was good.
For everyone except for the newborn and the mum, probably.
They were having a great time, I reckon. They were all right. So. They probably had it on Skype. They were getting involved. It was weird. It was weird. Mate, how good was the sort of just the general vibe in the town? I've never been. I've been outside of Prague before, but I've never been to Budvar. How would we say it? Budvar?
I'm going to go with the German Budvar.
Budvar.
Much easier to say than České Budějovice.
České Budějovice, yeah. I've
that.
never been there. It's a couple of hour drive out of Prague, but it's awesome. It's really, really cool. Like the old town's great. Beautiful restaurants. We were really wined and dined and had some
crafted, for a small town, a lot of craft bars as well, which was exciting to see. Obviously, we were there for the lager. But it was like nice. We had a lovely brut IPA, which I don't think I've ever said before, from Clock Brewing.
Yeah.
And what was the name of the brewery that made the delicious session? It was a session porter with oh god, what was in it? Was there coconut and
Siberia?
Siberia, I think it was called. Yeah, Siberia. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Siberia.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that
I think
was
so.
great beer as well. But you know, I mean, I did a social post about this. The highlight of the whole trip was the Budvar cellars, which, ironically, the tallest building in the Budvar complex is the cellar. It's not actually underground. But drinking the beer fresh, we've said this about Pilsner Urquell, about lots of different beers, but drinking the fresh lagers from tank it's peak beer as far as I'm concerned. There isn't anything better than fresh Czech lager from a tank.
No, and I think that is pretty much universal for like any Czech lager situation in a Czech tank, in a Czech brewery. But this was particularly special because it's just vast and like just an array of unexpected experimental beers that we got to tuck into. You know, with the Brewmeister, with the longest serving
employee.
He'd
been there nearly half of its history. He'd been there 55 years, and the brewery's 130 years old. So yeah.
He was great, that guy. Very, very had a very interesting turn of phrase, which I enjoyed, and a sort of lust for life. I thought he was 50 odd, or maybe 60 odd. 80 years old, the man was, Johnny. Unbelievable.
He kept saying, you know, we could die happy now. So he's clearly thinking about it, but he's too busy drinking to die.
Full of life. And also we were there over the course of a few days, and we just kept bumping into him. He's now a tour guide there, but he was the head of quality or the head of production or something for a long time.
Like in the lab, quality assurance, QA. Yeah.
So he just lives and breathes that place. He's retired, but he's not really retired, is he, Johnny? I think he's going there he's getting his sort of daily pension of amazing tank
7.5% wet hopped.
Yeah.
SARS Pilsner. Yeah.
It's keeping him young. He looked great. He looked bloody great. We can all learn from a bit of that.
I hope I look like that at 50, let alone 80.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he was in amazing shape. So we were over there making a film about Budvar, which, you know, Budvar is a brewery owned by the Czech Republic state. So it is properly ingrained in the country's identity and in its structure. And so we wanted to tell that story, but as well talk about, you know, the incredible Czech drinking culture. It's the country that drinks the most beer per capita in the world, and to explore that. So we went to lots of restaurants, other breweries, and properly explored Budvar with multiple different people, with the brewmaster, with Radim, with a historian called Ivo, and with your man. I don't actually remember his name, but our 80-year-old boy,
something like Hudgavar or something.
Oh, right.
No, that's bad. It wasn't pronounced like that. It began with H. Hudruskvar or something. It had a K in it, had an H in it, Johnny.
Yeah, most of these names do, yeah.
Mate, it was a good name. It was a good, strong name. I enjoyed it, but I've also forgotten it. Like an 80-year-old man, I've forgotten.
It's all right. We've recorded it. We don't need to remember it other than for purposes of this podcast. So we've got that story. And then also Brad presented a video with Radim, who is not a gunslinger, but a beer slinger. Pours, delicious Czech pours, and we digging into like the importance of tapsters or barkeeps in the Czech Republic. So we've got a great video learning about the pours, learning about the beers, learning about the importance of foam and all this kind of stuff. Because if there's one lesson the world should take from the Czech Republic, it's how to pour beer, because nobody does it quite like them. Yeah, it is an art form in their hands.
Exactly. It's just taking it to the experience to the next level, isn't it? So when the beers left the brewery, you know, it's out of the control of the brewer, but the way a beer is served is key to the experience as well. And those, like you say, they do it better there than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And it just makes the beer shine.
Yeah. So there's going to be... Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, do we think that's why you don't get hangovers with Czech beer? Or do we think that's just because it's so fresh? And also because it's a lie that you do get hangovers?
You definitely get hangovers from Czech beer.
I don't think they're anywhere near as bad as other hangovers I get. It's a far less painful experience. I think a Czech hangover from. It's the hearty food as well, though, isn't it? Right? How many? I averaged a goulash a day when I was there. I think you nearly achieved that, but I
subbed a goulash for a schnitzel at one point.
Yeah. I subbed a goulash for a burger at one point.
Yeah.
But it was a good burger. But yeah, I still had a goulash every day to try and keep the doctor away, but still felt fucked up.
Still might need to, yeah. Well, maybe we'll do. I feel like we could do an episode with Brewlosophy on, can you brew beer that gives you less of a hangover, like if there's no acetaldehyde in there or whatever it is. Maybe we'll dig into that. But that's a conversation for another day, another video. And we're not going to give away too much about above our trip because I've lined it all up as I tend to when we get back so that I know that we've got all the footage and we've got 2 hours of content for me to whittle down into half an hour. So that's going to be fun. It's going to be even harder than Adnams. And it's going to take a lot of beer to get me through that. But yeah, that will be coming in a couple of months. And that's all we have time for this week on the pod. So do pick up the Colonel Live Show box. The links and everything you need are below, and you can check out this week's video at the link in the podcast description as well. But yeah, we'll see you next week. Have amazing weekends. If you don't want a hangover, drink Czech beer.
Happy Friday, folks. I'm off for my Lemsip now, but please enjoy, drink sensibly, and have a great weekend.
There you go. Love and beer. Okay, done. The Bubble and Friday 5pm podcasts are brought to you by the nerds behind YouTube's craft beer channel. You can watch over 400 mini documentaries at youtube.com/the craft beer channel. And if you love what we do, support us via Patreon and get access to merchandise and our amazing Discord forum, a positive and welcoming space for everyone who loves beer, food, and homebrewing. Love and beer.